Hey everybody, it's Arielle, or Elle. I am back for another update for you guys. So today I'm going to talk all about my egg retrieval process, which happened just a few days ago. Okay, so I was super nervous for egg retrieval, mainly because I've never been under general anesthesia before. Apparently, when I was really little and I actually had tubes put into my ears for ear infections, and they put me under for that, but I don't remember it at all, and I was just really nervous about the whole process of, like, everyone said, oh, it feels like fainting, and I've never fainted before, and I was like, what do you mean? Like, you just black out? Like, that sounds horrible. So I was just super nervous. But it was great. Everyone at at MGH was absolutely amazing. So I'll go ahead and start with some updates. So when you guys last saw me, I was just kind of like giving you little updates here and there, vlogging about how my follicles were growing and all that good stuff. So we weren't sure exactly how many follicles I had. They kept doing estimates, and the last ultrasound I had right before egg retrieval, which was like 2 days before, because we triggered and then we did the egg retrieval. So 2 days before that, they thought I had about 20 follicles, which I thought was pretty good, but considering I started out with 34, I was a little bit like, what happened to 14? But I guess it's just they didn't finish growing, and my estrogen levels were just skyrocketing. Like, I think at the end they were almost at 4,000, and they were getting a little concerned about OHSS. I could tell. They didn't say it, but they were like, yeah, we don't want your estrogen levels getting any higher, so we're going to trigger, and then we're just going to go straight into egg retrieval. So the last scan I had revealed that we had about 20 follicles that looked like they could be mature, so I was excited. The night before, they had prescribed me Ambien so that I could try to sleep, because I usually work as a night shift nurse and I'm usually sleeping during the day, and they wanted me to sleep during the nighttime because you have to fast for 8 hours and not drink anything, including water. So that made me nervous, and I was like, hey, can we try something to help me sleep? So they gave me an Ambien. Let me just put it out there, it didn't work at all for me. I mean, I took it and I was nervous, so like that could definitely be a piece of it, but I didn't really sleep much. I think I was kind of like in and out of sleep a little bit here and there, but I didn't even need an alarm because we had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure we got to MGH on time because my surgery was at 7. So the alarm was supposed to go off at 5, and I remember it being like 4:30, and lying there awake and being like, wow, this Ambien didn't do anything. and I was like, you know what, I might as well like browse on my phone for 20 minutes, and I did. And then I like got up to pee, and my husband was like, what time is it? And I was like, your alarm's about to go off. And he's like, no. So poor guy. So obviously he took the day off to drive me in and everything and to be a part of this. So we drove in together, and I was less nervous than I thought I was going to be. Like, I was nervous for sure, but I thought I'd be like hysterical and just a mess, and I could just tell I was extremely panicky, and so I had all these like songs on my phone that I had downloaded specifically and made a playlist specifically for this day so that I could calm down a little bit, like all of our favorite songs, and just like some inspirational songs and some religious songs and things like that to kind of like calm myself down. So I was playing them on the way there, but I was actually kind of excited rather than just like really nervous. So anyways, so we got to MGH and we got all checked in and everything, and it was so funny because the other rooms I had been in kind of look like, if you've seen any other videos from other channels where they're like doing IUIs or whatever, they just look like those rooms, the daily rooms that they do like the ultrasounds and stuff like that for follicle checks and whatever. So those were those rooms, and then we went back to this other part of the IVF clinic, and like all of a sudden it was like walking into an OR suite. Like, it was so bizarre. I was like, this is so hidden. Like, it was so funny. So I guess they have one OR in the entire like fertility center that is just for egg retrievals and for transfers. So they do one at a time, which is great. So the whole team just does one at a time. They're not like multiple going on at a time. So and then they have like a whole bunch of beds. kind of near the OR area, and you walk in and there's lockers, and so they said, okay, this is your locker for the day, you can put all of your stuff in there, and I, of course, like, was me, and I didn't, like, really bring anything. All I brought was, like, my purse, which didn't have anything super valuable in it, because, you know, I was having surgery that day, so I basically just brought, like, ID and whatever else, so I was like, okay, and I just, like, put it in, but I wasn't super worried about it. So I put my stuff in there, and then they gave me a whole bunch of scrubs to put on, or not scrubs, but like OR gear, like patient gowns and booties and everything. And it was so funny. So this is a really good point for all those that are potentially going to be using Lucky socks or special socks. I had gotten myself a pair of socks that have divergent birds and symbols on them, which is a book that I really, really loved. So I decided to get those, and I was wearing them, and they were like, oh, you have to put these over. They're like these sterile, clean hospital socks that have like the ribbing on them. And I was like, oh, well, is there any way I can leave these socks? And they're like, oh, are they lucky? And I was like, yes. And they're like, oh, just put them over it. So that was great. So I got to keep my divergent socks on. You couldn't really see them, but they were on, which was the important part. So for all those bringing lucky socks, just understand some hospitals will make you put socks over them just to maintain a sterile OR. That's why they wanted me to put the socks on. I asked, oh, is it because they need treads? Because these socks have treads on them. Like I put puffy paint on them so they would stick to the floor when I walked and I didn't slip. And they're like, no, that's not it. You just need to have something like sterile or whatever on your feet so that we don't like contaminate the OR. So that I totally understood. So that was great. So they gave me like the goofy little hair thingy, like hairnet thing, and they gave me all the scrubs. And the first time I put the gowns, and the first time I put the gowns on backwards, which was really funny. Like, you would think that I would know which way to put gowns on, but I've never had surgery before. And I'm not an OR nurse, so I work in home health, so I didn't know which way you're supposed to put them on. But apparently there's one that, like, opens in the back, and then there's this robe thing that opens in the front so that you stay modest and warm. So I put them backwards, which was really funny. So I walked out of the bathroom all dressed, and she's like, oh, you put them on backwards. Here, let me show you. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So anyway, so I got everything dressed, and I laid on the bed, and they did a set of vitals, and my heartbeat was like 120 beats a minute, and she's like, you must be really nervous, and I'm like, yeah, and they were so nice because they could tell how incredibly nervous I was, and I was like trying to stay calm. My husband was sitting next to me, but he had to be taken away to do his part of the IVF egg retrieval process. I'll leave it at that. So, but he did stay. I think he stayed until they took me in. So, and then after that, like while I was in retrieval, I think that's when they took him back to do his part. So anyways, so I'm lying there and waiting, and then they're like, okay, we're gonna go in, and the anesthesiologist talked to me about my latex allergy and everything, and everything looked great, and you know, I told them I was nervous, and so they were aware, and then we just went, they had me stand up, which I thought was really funny. I thought I'd be like wheeled in there, but no, they had me like stand up and walk into the room, so that was fine. Obviously they started an IV and everything, which was totally fine. The IV wasn't even bad. I don't care about needles, so that wasn't bad at all. And then my husband gave me a little hug, and I was like, no, I want a really good hug. So, because I was really nervous, so I gave him a really good hug. And then they were playing the radio on in the background, and as I was walking into egg retrieval, our song came on, which is 1,000 Years by Christina Perri, and that was the song we danced to at our wedding, our first dance, and it's kind of been our tribute song, and especially through infertility, because it feels like you're waiting 1,000 years for your child, so that you've, you know, loved all along, like the lyrics say. So anyway, so it was our song back when we were just a couple, and then through trying to have a baby, that's really become our anthem. So as I'm walking in, and it's not even like a popular song anymore, and the radio was playing, and it came on, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like if that is not a sign, I don't know what is. But it just was so sweet, and I immediately like calmed down. So I go in and I lay on the table and everything's good. And then before I even know it, the anesthesiologist like, I'm just putting something in your IV just to like calm you down. And I was like, okay. And they're reading off the list of like what I'm here for, and it's like the safety check thing, you know, like the safety pause or whatever they do. And so they verified again my name and date of birth and whatever. And immediately I was just like, whatever they gave me, I was just like, wow, my legs feel really heavy. And they're like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, before your legs get too heavy and numb, let's put you into like the stirrups. So they had like really comfy stirrups. They weren't normal ones. They had like padding at the knee, and they were like really, really comfortable. It was like a specially made couch for your legs, and it was incredibly awesome. So that part was nice. So I get into the position, and then the anesthesiologist was so freaking smart because he could tell I was so nervous, and I was just nervous about like the passing out part. So he tricked me in a really awesome way. Is he handed me the mask, and he said, you can hold it yourself, it's totally fine, it's just oxygen, like you're totally fine. We just want to give you a little bit of oxygen before we put you under. And I was like, okay. And I thought it could have been it, but I was waiting for him to say like, okay, count backwards from 10, which is what they always do. But he was so smart. You know what he did is he handed me the mask, and he knew that I was going out because I let go of the mask. And that's how he knew I was out, which was so smart, instead of counting backwards from 10, because he knew that like, that I was a nurse, and that I knew you always say count backwards from 10, and that's how they know that you're passed out. And he probably could guess that like that's the part that would freak me out. And so he was so smart, and I'm so happy he did that, because it's the last thing I remember. I remember the mask on, and I remember breathing, and then that's it. So anyway, so that was the last thing that I remember, which was great. I didn't have any inklings. I've had some people say that they were under really light sedation and they felt things or they heard things. I was completely out, like out for the count. The next thing I remember, I'm waking up in the bed, and I wasn't in severe pain, but I was cramping really hard, I could feel. And I just remember my first words were, ow. It was so funny. Like, I've heard some people come out and they're like crying, or they're like saying really weird things, but I was pretty with it as soon as I came out of the anesthesia. And I just remember saying, ow, like, it was so weird. It was like I was getting woken up from cramps, which has happened during periods before, so I think that's what I thought originally. It was like I was just napping and I like woke up from a cramp. And then it took me maybe less than a half a second to like realize where I was, and I was so happy. I'm like, oh, it's done, thank God. So the nurse is like, ow, like, how was your pain? And then I had another big cramp, and I was just like, oh, it's not good. So anyway, she's like, what's your pain level? And I was like, well, during a cramp, it's like a 6 out of a 10, which is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but I was still a smidge out of it. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more pain medicine. Because I guess they had given me a little bit like in the OR, but then when you come out, they like just do pain meds by however you feel. So they did that, and within a few minutes, I was feeling so much better, and the cramps subsided, which was awesome. So I was feeling so much better. I didn't feel loopy at all from the pain medicine. I'm not 100% sure what she gave me, but I think it was pretty mild. I still don't think they didn't do any NSAIDs, like any ibuprofen or anything, because again, they're so worried about like thin blood. So they only did like Tylenol and other, I think like opioids during the actual surgery, but anyway, so I felt better, and then she's like, so what's your pain level now? And I'm like, oh, it's like a 1 or a 2. I'm like, it's not bad at all. But I came out, and I was cramping really hard, and so then that really helped. And she had already put a heat pack on, and I remember one of the first things I said, too, is I was, like, touching my hair, because I, like, could feel my hair on my, like, laying on my chest, because my hair is pretty long. And I was like, what happened to my hairnet? And she's like, oh, I already took it off of you. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was just really funny. I was just like, what happened? So that was like the funny things you remember from egg retrieval. So anyway, so then I'm lying there, and my husband comes back, and he's like so happy that I feel good and everything's really good and everything's going great. And then I asked, and I said, and how many eggs did I get? And they said, oh, they're about to tell you. And as I mentioned this, the embryologist or her assistant or whoever, all dressed in scrubs and everything, walks in and hands me a paper. She hands me a paper, and it says 18. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, we got 18 eggs, and we're really excited. And I said, do we know how many are mature? And she's like, we won't know that until, until we fertilize them or until we like analyze them. But for right now, we have them, and that's all good. And so I was really happy about that. So she's like, we'll call you tomorrow with the fertilization report, and I was just thrilled. So, I mean, I wasn't like ecstatic because I was like, oh, 18, and my husband's like, oh, that's great, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty average, and the nurse is like, no, that's definitely above average, and I was like, okay, and then, like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm glad we got 18 and not more, because I was really sore after egg retrieval, and really bloated, and I definitely didn't get OHSS, and we were so careful not to get OHSS, I'll tell you why, and, But I think if I had gotten more than 18 eggs, that I definitely would have been prone because my estrogen was so high and I'm just like really sensitive down there from the endometriosis. So I'm actually really glad we just got 18 eggs and not like, 35 or whatever. So, or 34, which is what my original follicle count was. So anyway, so that was good. And then there wasn't much after that. I just got dressed and I stayed like laying down for a little bit, and then they did vitals and everything was good, and then they took the IV out, and then we were discharged, and that was that. I was still kind of groggy and sore, like coming downstairs and everything. Oh, big tip, what we did is we actually got a car thing that like plugs into your cigarette lighter and makes an outlet, and we brought my electric heating pad with me, which we'd actually been doing for a couple days because I was so incredibly sore leading up to egg retrieval since I was huge. And as I was growing, like the ovaries were growing, I could feel it like stretching out adhesions, if that makes sense. If you have endometriosis, I was really sore. So I was basically using a heating pad on and off for days. So we actually plugged it into the car and brought it with us. So that was huge because I was just really uncomfortable. So we get into the car and everything, and I remember I'm like standing waiting to pay for parking because it's MGH and you have to like stand in a line to pay for parking, and I'm just kind of like sleepy and out of it, and like holding my belly, and I just like look really sore and uncomfortable, and the lady at the cashier was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm fine, we just got out of day surgery, but I'm totally fine." And she's like, "Okay." And so that was funny. I like was not hiding it at all. It was just like, ooh. So we get to the car and everything's fine, and then it wasn't until we got home, I think all of the pain medicine was wearing off. So they didn't give me any pain medicine at all to bring home with me, which I was kind of surprised by, and I was like, if I have pain, what do I do? And they're like, just take Tylenol, and I'm like, okay. So we get home and I'm lying in bed and I can't, and I'm really tired and I want to sleep, but I like literally every time I fall asleep, I wake up to an awful cramp, and I'm just in a lot of pain down there, and I like couldn't take it. So and then the instructions were like, just take Tylenol. And so yeah, it was definitely more painful than I thought it was going to be. I would say be your own advocate, and like I should have called them and said I was in a lot of pain. I was just like trying to put up with it and trying different things to try to help relax myself. But I really, the first like day and a half were pretty miserable, and I was really, really uncomfortable. So I would say if I were you guys, I would be your own advocate, and if you get that uncomfortable, call them and tell them, because I personally was like, I got my wisdom teeth out like a year and a half ago, and they prescribed me Percocet for getting the wisdom teeth out, and they just stuck needles up my vagina, and they didn't give me anything but Tylenol to come home with, and I was so uncomfortable, and I like barely slept, and it was just awful. So the things we did to prevent OHSS is drinking tons of Gatorade, tons of coconut water, and tons of protein shakes. Now, a lot of people don't know about the protein part, but you need lots of protein to rebuild the cells that become slightly just like opened up and everything by the needle when they're aspirating. So we did a lot of research, and I did not get any OHSS. I had a lot of bloating, but that was it. And so we did lots. I drank almost no water. I drank all Gatorade, all coconut water, and all protein shakes, and that actually helped me recover really quickly, I think. And it really brought the bloating down, and it brought the pain level down, and so I felt really, really good doing that. So that's what I would highly recommend to everybody, is to just do, I bought powdered Gatorade, and we just made up a whole bunch of like water bottles beforehand, and I brought them all with me, and we drank them in the car on the way home, and my husband took really good care of me and like made sure I always had tons of like protein shakes ready, and we got a shaker bottle and protein powder, and so we were just really, really on top of it, and I think that's what really helped to prevent any OHSS from occurring. So, but yes, that is the story of my egg retrieval, and that's it for right now. I'm going to jump on later on today and post another really quick video in the same outfit because it's this morning right now, but I'm going to jump on really quick and let you know the fertilization report.